everybody. Welcome back to the Strength and Weakness podcast. This is Morgan, one of your co-hosts, and Ellen, my fellow co-pilot in arms. And today we are circling back on our part 2 of approaching Pride Month and how, as Christians, we should think about it from a Christian perspective. And today we are going to dive into the question that I know you all are on the edge of your seat waiting to ask, which is, should I attend a pride parade? And I am going to give you a spoiler alert. We are not going to give you a direct answer today. And we were laughing about it before we started recording this podcast, because I do think a lot of people come to our ministry with the question or a question of, how should I do this? Give me a definitive yes or no, black or white. And we have to live in the messy middle, in the gray areas. And sometimes the gray is a little bit darker. Sometimes the gray is a little bit lighter. But we are very honest when we say we don't have all the answers for you. And a lot of it comes down to your own personal consciousness. So I'm just going to kick this episode off and then hand it over to Ellen because she has something to say.
I was just going to say how very Jesus-like of us. I must admit, we're striving to follow Jesus and not giving people direct answers, because how many times, this is the most frustrating thing about Jesus, but also I think one of the most noble, is that how many times in the Bible did someone ask him a very direct yes or no, black and white question, and he answered it in this floofy way that got right to the heart of it, but did not give a direct answer. Like, this woman committed adultery. Should she die or should she live? And he was like, if you've ever not sinned, go ahead, right? Like, that is not a clear answer. So we're in good company, Morgan, not giving people a black or white answer.
Thanks for making me feel better about myself, Ellen. No, and I also always love that Jesus would then tell a story too of like, well, let me tell you a parable. And then you're
Right.
like, oh, now I have to think about it. But that is what we're hoping to do
Yeah.
today, is to ask you some prompting and probing questions that you can think about and get to a place that you feel confident that if somebody was to ask you, why did you go to Pride? You could give them a solid biblical answer of why you decided to. And if you decided not to, also why you chose not to go, and that you feel very strongly behind why you chose to make that decision. And so I do love to always kick these conversations off, like acknowledging that this is a hard question, that a lot of Christians wrestle with this. It is something, like we talked about in our last podcast, something that is highly debated in the Christian community. I think at this point, Ellen and I have heard all answers to this question, and some on all ends of the spectrum. I talked about a spectrum in our last podcast of like extreme on both sides. And again, we're hoping to help you navigate this to figure out where you land, because there is not a right or wrong answer. So jumping right into it, Ellen, why? I know I talked a lot about like why this is a messy middle, but from your perspective, like, why do we have to wrestle through this question? Why is it not a black and white answer?
Yeah, I think, a lot of things, some things in the Bible are black and white and explicitly clear. For example, no Christian should be crossing gender boundaries or giving in to sexual temptations that fall outside of the bounds of what God lays out in the Bible, right? Those things are very black and white, what our expectations or God's expectations are for us as Christians. A lot of things are not black and white. And so when that's the case, I think we have to wrestle through some spiritual principles. And that means we have to exercise spiritual discernment. Mama Bear Apologetics calls it chew and spit, right? Like, we have to take it in, chew on it, and spit out what the bad and keep the good of it, right? And so I think when we do that, it's harder and it takes more time and intention, but it's much closer, it's much more aligned to the heart of God than just saying it's all good or it's all bad. I think very few things in life can we say that with, because every person is created in God's image. So they're all searching for that origin in some way. A lot of them are searching for it in the wrong place, but their underlying desire, almost always we can affirm, even if we disagree with how they're going about it. So I think even on top of that, right, I don't think the whole point is to come to a clear answer on this question. I think our whole point as Christians is to be continually transformed into the likeness of God. And there's something about that wrestling process that helps us get to that. We as humans want to make it about the right or wrong. do we go, do we not go?
Yeah.
I don't think God's as concerned with that as he is about our hearts, our transformation into his likeness. So there's something about engaging in the wrestle. So we have to be able
Yeah.
to pledge a clear conscience before God in this, but that means we have to engage in the wrestle.
I feel like there's a very clear biblical example of this, of like Jesus eating with sinners and prostitutes, and the religious leaders being like, "Well, why did you choose to do that?"
Yeah.
Right? Like Jesus went through this, right? It wasn't a parade, but in their day and age, right? Like he was eating with tax collectors and sinners and
Yeah.
prostitutes. Like nothing would say more, which I think that was the response of the religious leaders, right? Like they wanted a black or white answer. Like, why did you do that?
Right.
And I think Jesus has such a I mean, he sets a great example in so many ways, but I think even his response and his wrestling and his posture was just so much of love and compassion. And we talked a lot about that in our last podcast, but your heart has to be in a place that's ready and willing to be
Mm.
compassionate and engaging with people who are different. So I just think it's interesting too. Like as you were talking, I was like, wow, uh, Jesus went through this in their day and age. It just looked a little bit different.
Yes. And I want to be like totally transparent with people who are listening to this. Even we struggle with, right? Like we work in this field, and if someone were to say like, should I go to a pride event? I lend toward just saying no. No, I don't think that's wise, right? But I do think that this question requires more nuance, more consideration, more wrestle than just a flat yes or no. So, though it's uncomfortable, right? That's part of why I just want to say no, probably not, right? Because it's
It's
more
easy.
comfortable. It's
No.
easier to say that, right? But
Yeah.
let's get uncomfortable and wrestle through.
Yeah. So a couple of the considerations, right, as we're thinking through this, um, I think I've heard you talk about some of these things before. And the reason just for our listeners in general, the reason I always like to lean into Ellen's expertise here is because I do think that this is something that um, a lot of Christians have feelings about, right? Like, I think you
Hmm.
could go to anybody and be like, "Should I go to the Pride Parade?" And somebody's gonna come up with a reason why you should or you shouldn't. And Ellen, I think I appreciate your perspective because not only are you educated in, like, sexuality and adolescent sexuality and marriage and family therapy and all of those things, but I think on top of that, like, you have a lived experience of it as well. So anyways, I put all that to preface, like, for our listeners, this isn't just Morgan's opinion or Ellen's opinion. Like, I think, Ellen,
Mm.
you are not only engaged in this community and, like, helping and loving people through it, but also, like, you've lived it yourself. So, I just like to preface your expertise here. What are some considerations that you would recommend as people start to wrestle through this question of why should or why shouldn't I go? If they don't wanna take the easy road and they're like, "Okay, I wanna do some of the hard work," what
Yeah.
would you recommend them consider?
Yeah, well, I think why is the exact right question we should be asking, right? It's not what do we do? Should we go? Should we not go? I think a good biblical case could be made either way, honestly. I think really the question we want to ask is why? Why do I want to go or not go? I think God cares a lot less about what we do, a lot more about why we do it. So, some things I would consider one for me would be my personal righteousness, right? If you're attracted to the same sex or in any way might struggle or stumble, if you were to attend a pride event or cause someone else to stumble, that would be a big consideration you want to take, into account as you're deciding why do I want to go? Why do I not want to go? Or am I going to go? Am I not going to go? Um, is this gonna, I think another reason or another thing to consider is, like we said, your conscience before God. What is your biblical case for going or not going, right? Like I said, I think a good case could be made either way, but we want to engage in that wrestle. And then I think we also want to consider how might this impact other people? I think we want to be careful not to make decisions based on what other people might think about it. But in that effort to pledge a clear conscience, we want to determine how will this uphold or not uphold my identity in Christ? How will this uphold or not uphold God's statutes, God's love for people, God's, expectations of righteousness? So we have a really important identity to uphold and to represent. We represent God in this world. We're his ambassadors here. So we want to give that some thought too. Not make decisions because of what other people will think, but we want to be aware of the implications of our actions here.
Yeah, so it sounds like right, we're looking both internal and external of, like and which I think as Christians, like, we should be doing all the time, but this is just in particular, like, in specifics, and so I think something that's been on my heart, and I'm curious your thoughts, and I'm sure listeners who are in college or late high school are going through this, of like, how do you navigate those conversations with your friends? Like, let's say you do the hard work and you're like, or maybe I'm a college student, I haven't done the hard work, but I have so many friends who are
Mm.
going, and of course they're going to be like, "You're our friend. Do you want to come with us?" Like, how do you communicate this fine line between my beliefs and how I'm going to go or not go? I can just see that being like a really hard conversation
Yeah.
um, for people in that demographic, like, do you have any recommendations on, like, how we communicate that?
Yeah, well, I would say when you're first approached or asked, I would rarely ever make a decision in the moment because you're not able to wrestle and consider all these things in that moment when you're faced with this pressure from your friends, wanting to please them, wanting to convey your love for them, but also wanting to uphold your responsibility as God's child. So I think that like that's too much to think of right in that moment. So I always encourage people to set what I like to call a temporal boundary, right? Say something like, wow, thank you for asking me to come with you. I know how much this means to you. You mean so much to me. I really want to give this some careful consideration. I'm going to need time to go and think and pray and weigh this against, my conscience and see what I feel comfortable with because I care about you too much to just give you a quick, answer in this moment that's based on surfacey stuff. I want to really think through this. So that would be my initial response and then I would go
Yeah.
away do that engage in that wrestle. And then I think, if you decide, hey, I can go to a pride event with a clear conscience. I would make sure that you communicate that with some clarity, right? Uh, um, uh, I want to let I would say something like, hey, friend, I want to let you know that I have decided, I've thought about it, I've prayed about it, I've engaged in this wrestling process in my conscience, and I can, with a clear conscience, join you at this pride event. I do want you to know that me being here does not mean that I agree with everything that's being celebrated here, but I do love you. And I want to be present in your life, even in the areas that, we don't fully align on. So I hope that my presence here today shows you that, right? So
Yeah.
you're still upholding your conscience, your righteousness before God, and this unconditional love and acceptance for your friend at this pride event. I think if yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, like, that's right, friend to friend, like, what if you're a parent and your kid asks you to go with you? What are your
Yeah.
I'm sure you've gotten that question before, like, what's your, response to parents?
Yeah, well, I would say the same thing. Temporal boundary, number one, right? Never, ever, ever give an answer, especially to your kid in the moment. Say, sweetie, thanks for asking me. This is such a big deal. I really want to give this some careful consideration because I see how important it is to you. Let me go pray. Let me talk to your other parent if there is one. Let me get some advice and I'll get back to you this Saturday with an answer, right? And then you engage in that wrestle. You align with God. You get some advice, right? Make sure your heart is rooted in love, not fear. And you're making this decision out of love, not fear. And then the only thing I would add to that, like that process I already outlined, if it's your friend, that plus you have your child, especially up until a certain age, is sort of beholden to the values of your home. And so I think it's okay to say, at some point in your life, you'll be able to make this decision on your own, whether you'll be able to go to this event. But right now, given your age and maturity level, we're making this decision for you. And either you can go because that upholds a value we have in our home, or you cannot go because that goes against a value that we have in our home. And I would give some good reasons why, biblical reasons why you made your decision either way, what your conscience is, so that your child doesn't just know what your decision is, but why your decision was that, so they can
Mm,
learn, get a sneak peek behind the curtain of what this wrestling process looks like.
yeah.
Um, is that what you were asking? Or if
Yeah.
your gay child says,
No, no,
"Hey,
no.
will you come with me?" Yeah.
Oh, well,
Okay.
I mean, I think would it change if they were gay?
No, I mean, the only thing is if they're of a certain age, right, you might not have control over whether they go to a pride event and them asking you to come. It would be very similar to a consideration with your friend, right? You would say, yes, I can go. Doesn't mean I agree with everything that's being celebrated here, but I want to, I love you and I want to show you that with my presence here. Or if you decide you can't go, I think we can say something like, I want you to know how much I love you. I always want to show up for you, but I also want to be honest with you and with God. I can't, in good conscience, attend an event that celebrates a lifestyle that I don't personally believe honors God. That doesn't change how I feel about you. I'm still in your life. I'm still cheering for you. I still want to know you. I'd
Yeah.
love to be connected with other, different parts of your journey in a way that honors both me and you. So I think there's a way, right? Again, it's not about the what, whether we decide to go or not go. It's more about the why we've made that decision. And I think relationally, it's more about how we communicate that decision. I think there's a way we can communicate it that still maintains connection with our friends, with our children. Even if they don't like all the parts of our
Yeah.
decision, we can still maintain connection.
Yeah, that's what I was hearing. Like, first, I was like, gosh, there is no right or wrong answer, like, as you were sharing the response. But even more so, like, I think when I think about when people come to me with these kind of questions, I like want to run and hide. And I'm like, if I just avoid the question, then everything will be okay. And then, like, all these wedges start getting put into the conversation or into the relationship. Um, but I do think that it was really insightful to listen to you share the response because there is so much relationship building and freedom in how you were sharing that,
Yeah.
where I just think, like, in real life, we just are not used to sharing the whys behind it, and maybe that's because 'cause we're moving so fast that we don't know
Good
the
point.
whys. We just wanna be like, "Yes or no." But I think that's where I've seen a lot of damage done in friendships and relationships and parent-child relationships where the parents just like, "No." And I mean, I've done it to my own kids. It's like, "Mom, can I have" "No." And I'm like, "Okay, well, why can't they have that?" And
Right.
like and
Yeah.
I don't give them the answer to that, or the why behind it, and so, yeah, I think it's just such a hard, gray area to live, but I think we are going to just be in this gray area more and more, and I think what it pushes Christians to do is to get more in touch with where they actually stand before God and their own personal righteousness, because
Yeah.
if you're not confident in where you stand before God and your own personal righteousness and in your relationship with Him, this is going to be really hard because it will be easier to just say yes or no, and
Yeah.
then, cut off relationships or friendships, but there is a place that we can live somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love everything you're saying. One, I so love that you said slow it down, slow your life down, slow your heart down, your mind down enough to respond to this well, appropriately. That is really like a fundamental in relational therapy. I'm a marriage and family therapist, so most of that relationship is, marriages for me or couples. But there is a therapeutic technique called emotion focused therapy. And really, like the underpinning for this therapy is slow everything down. What did that sentence, that word mean for you? What is this emotion that's coming up right now, right? And you're right, we just live in such a fast-paced society. We just want to get to the outcome, go or not go,
Yeah.
yes or no, right? And
Yeah.
I think there's so much we miss in the process. This is true about relationships. It's rare, the answer is never in the content. Go or not go. Get a dog, don't get a dog. Have a baby, don't have a baby. The
Yeah.
answer is always in the process. How do we go about seeing each other, connecting with each other through this process? I can't tell
Yeah.
you how many times my therapy office is full of individuals and couples and parent and children relationships that are so fueled by fear that they zoom in on the what, right? I have to go to this pride event or else my friend will think that I'm mad at them or else my child will break off contact with me or they'll think that I don't love them. And I think we get so stuck there that we actually lose the ability to connect with people even through disagreement. We can absolutely say, I love you, I support you, I can't do this or I can do this. This is what it means. This is what it does not mean. And through that process, not the content, but the process, we actually develop exactly what we long for and what they're really longing for, which is true connection. True
Yeah.
connection, though, is not found in fear-based behavioral compliance, which is what we,
Yeah.
usually result in or result
Yeah.
resort to. But I think especially parents, but certainly with our friends too, we resort to this fear-based behavioral compliance. And even when we do what we think will please the other person, we end up feeling disconnected from them because we were not transparent. We didn't have really real, true, authentic connection with them. And so the good news for Christians is that we can have real, true, authentic connection with people, even if we disappoint them with our decisions, even if we don't agree with them.
Oh, I don't think there's a better way to end the podcast, Ellen. Again, like reminder to our listeners, I know that you might be feeling frustrated because we didn't give you a yes or a no. But I think to Ellen's point, right? Like being able to still maintain connection, even in disagreement, being able to share that why and let God work through the process, I think will end up giving you the answer that you're looking for. So we hope that you enjoyed this podcast and we will see you next time.